So welcome to all of our participants. This is the ASBMB's Research Careers in Industry webinar. I apologize. We were supposed to have all of our panelists on webcams, but our software for the webcams isn't working this afternoon, so I'm going to work on that as the panelists introduce themselves, but I do apologize. We normally have webcams for this, so right now it's going to be audio only. If you do have any trouble with the audio or any other technical aspect with the webinar, just let us know in the chat box and we'll try to help you. But we appreciate you coming to this webinar, which is the second in our series this year. So on behalf of the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, I'd like to welcome you, and I hope this will be a useful and helpful webinar for you. We had over 200 people registered for this webinar, so it's a very popular topic. And right now we have over 70 people joining us right now on the webinar, so welcome to all of you. I'm going to turn it over to Ray Sweet right now. Ray is a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee, and he was instrumental in setting up this webinar today. So Ray, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Did you want to start with introductions, or do you want to start with? I
want to start with you.
Right. Did you start with the personal introductions, Ari, or did you want to start with the background? Okay.
I would like to start with the background.
Okay. So many in my interactions with students, postdocs, etc., the understanding of the scope of industry is often not there. That you often think of the pharmaceutical industry as possibly the main source of your job opportunities. What's true is that there's a very large scope to industry. Certainly at the top of the pharmaceuticals, from small to large, that either making novel chemical or biologic therapeutics or engaged in the generics or biosimilar area. There's also a large industry around diagnostics, which entails medical tests, translational medicine, biomarkers, companion diagnostics. All of these require the skills that you have in BMB training. There's also a number of contract research organizations, CROs, and these generally supplement one or more of all of the steps involved in, say, the generation of new drugs. They also make so not only the reagents, but also the assays and the various analyses that go with that. And then there are a large number that you have interacted with in your academic research, in particular, which are research reagent and instrument providers. Again, all of those assays and all those assay kits, all of those reagents you make were created by someone built up on some research project. There's a number of companies involved in devices and a growing number in the area of biomaterials. Again, each of these, all of these devices require continuous research and development. There's a number of emerging technologies, bioinformatics, of course, being a very big one, systems and synthetic biology, a new area, and a lot of cellular and genetic therapies related to personalized medicine on the horizon. And then outside of the sort of medical healthcare area, there's the AGRA businesses, forensic medicine, and a lot of others. And you should also note, if you're searching on companies, that you will find that many of them actually encompass several of those activities above. And on this webinar, we have scientists here who are representing some of these different areas, and as you will hear a little bit about their experience on how they have found their positions and the type of work that they do in their these various types of companies. That's my background information for this webinar.
Thank you, Ray. So if you just joined the webinar, we are trying to get the webcams enabled. We're having a little trouble with the software this afternoon, but we are going to go ahead and continue on, so you'll be able to hear the panelists speaking. So again, a big thank you to our panelists today. We have 5 of them here to talk with you. And right now I'm going to give them 2 to 3 minutes each to share some highlights of their career path, information about their typical day, and some of their job responsibilities. So we're going to start off with Frank Fan, who is the Senior Director of Global R&D and China Operations at Promega. Frank, can you tell us a little bit about your career path, your typical day, and your job responsibilities?
Yes, I'm very glad to. And again, thank you for putting together this webinar. I wish that I had this experience when I was looking for directions and advices as a graduate student and postdoc. So my name is Frank Fan. I work in the industry, as we highlighted, reagents and instruments industry. So it's about technology, basically providing tools for many of you to use. And my background is that I got my biology training as a bachelor in China, and then PhD from University of Iowa on chemistry, postdoc at Yale for molecular genetics, and then I joined industry back in 1997, worked for SmithKline Beecham and later GSK for 5 years, and finally I came to Promega in 2002. I've been working and enjoying myself in the tool-making industry for the last 15 years. So what I enjoy and my kind of typical day look like really differs from different stages. Just like many of my colleagues and panelists started with, call it blue collar, a lot of time at bench. Then you gradually build up your career, then becoming group leaders, and now I have a kind of a senior leader position in the company. We're still largely to do with R&D operation globally, but also taking some responsibility for overall operation in China. So my typical day now is more read and write, a lot to do with emails, but a lot of meetings. Meetings with my direct reports, a meeting with scientists and talking about projects mainly within the office or within the headquarters. Meanwhile, I also have a lot of traveling experiences. That means go out and talk to both internal, we have 16 branches around the globe, and also external customers who really like to continue learning what their needs are and connect with what we're doing in headquarters, R&D and so on. And also doing seminars and talking about technology and talking about industry trends and so on. And a little bit about my job responsibilities, and I think Erica highlighted something like talk about what's satisfying the most and frustrating, and share some thoughts of work and balance and just quickly speak to that. What I enjoy most really for our industry compared with pharma or drug discovery is number one is that we must follow the trend of the industry and science very closely, and customer need is our number one thing to monitor at all times. And our project changes along the need changes. And the other thing I enjoy most is that relatively speaking, the project execution time is short. Within a year or so, we may make certain assays and we're able to launch the market and then continue to improve the process if this is not the best and we can improve. And that as compared to drug discovery may take much longer time. And what I actually frustrating the most, as perhaps some of the panelists working in the industry all sure, is that there's lots of meetings. And meetings generate lots of documents and sea of meetings, and then some of the documents may draw oneself if they don't do a good job of kind of allocating time and push off some of the meetings that are not necessary. So the work and life balance for this company is quite well. So we have, for Promega, a lot of wellness programs that allow our employees, including myself, concentrate ourselves on work, but also enjoying life. And we have also programs called Emotion and Social Intelligence, which a lot of companies are now embracing. So that's from me. Erica, is there anything else you want me to say or pass on to other panelists?
I think that's great for now. I think you gave a lot of great information, and we'll touch back after the other panelists have had a chance to introduce themselves. That's great. Thank you, Frank. Next up, we have Greg Gatto. Greg is a senior scientific investigator at GlaxoSmithKline. Greg, can you tell us a little bit about your career path, your typical day, and some of your job responsibilities?
Sure, Erica. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share my experiences with student members of the society and as a part of this committee. I got my undergraduate degree in chemistry, and then I was a trainee at Johns Hopkins Medical School, where I received both an MD and a PhD as a part of the dual degree program. My PhD was in biochemistry and biophysics, and decided during that training that I really wanted to pursue in career research, so I opted not to do any more formal medical training, so no residency or internship, but then went and did a research postdoctoral fellowship, which I did up at Harvard Medical School with Chris Walsh, and that was mostly in enzymology work. Chris has a number of postdocs he just retired, had a number of postdocs in his lab, many of whom go on to industry. So I got the experience of working with an advisor who sent a good portion of his postdocs graduated and went on to careers in industry as well as academia. So I got to hear the perspectives from both sides and became very interested in pursuing a career in industry. I then started at GlaxoSmithKline, where I've been since. So I've been at GSK now for about 11 years. I work in the cardiovascular space. I started out as an enzymologist in the cardiovascular group, and now I'm kind of a biology investigator and program leader in a smaller group dedicated towards heart failure and comorbidities associated with heart failure. As Frank, I think, nicely summarized, I think there's an evolution of your career when you first start out, and as you progress. At least that's been my experience in a large pharmaceutical company. Most of my time was spent when I first joined the company at the bench, and over time, as I became more involved in higher level meetings, strategy meetings, program team meetings, I eventually got the opportunity to lead a program, which is a really unique experience in terms of managing a matrix team of people with a lot of different backgrounds and experience. And that's grown since I started. So now I don't spend very much time in lab. I spend a lot of time either managing programs. So this would be a particular project or asset that we'd like to advance to enter into human trials. So I'm kind of working on the transition between an asset that's only been in animals, working on the efficacy and safety studies such that we can then progress it into humans. And so my days are mostly spent in meetings with either the program teams or members of the program teams that I'm a part of, maybe meetings with senior leadership to discuss strategy associated with our business unit. And also, which I enjoy the most, are the meetings that I have with my direct reports. They are the ones who spend most of their time in lab now, and so I've enjoyed kind of working with them. And two of my direct reports are recently joined the company after being postdocs, so kind of helping them kind of adjust to life in industry after coming in from a career in academia. So that's basically what my day is like, and those are basically what my responsibilities are like.
Thanks, Greg. That was great. Jennifer, are you able to speak? Can we hear you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Wonderful. All right. So Jennifer Gonzalez is a scientist at Janssen Biotherapeutics. Jennifer, would you tell us a little bit about your career path, your typical day, and your job responsibilities?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Erica. So I obtained my PhD in biochemistry and biophysics in 2010 from University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, UT Health at Houston. I then did a postdoctoral fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine, also in Houston, for around 3.5 years. And the focus of my graduate and postdoc research was using a biophysical approach to correlate the structure and function of membrane proteins, mostly neuronal ion channels. I then joined Janssen. So I'm currently a scientist at Janssen, which is part of the pharmaceutical companies of Johnson & Johnson, and I have been here for a little over 3 years, and I've served various roles within Janssen in the biologics research department, and I've gained expertise in high throughput cell-based and immunoassay technologies, the generation of in vitro and in vivo targeted modifications using gene editing technology like CRISPR-Cas9 system, and then my current role is in the antigen design and production group for the development of monoclonal antibodies as therapeutic candidates. And as a scientist, I'm not just in the lab all day, I'm also a project leader. I lead immuno-oncology pre-portfolio projects by helping to develop strategies to produce quality monoclonal antibodies as therapeutics. I coordinate department activities to make sure things are done efficiently, and I also contribute to decision points for generating lead candidates. So most of my days are spent balancing my time in the lab and as a project leader.
Great, thank you. Moving on to Jenna Hendershot, who is a senior scientist in the new product development division at Kaman Chemical. Jenna, would you like to share a little bit about your career path, your typical day, and your job responsibilities?
Most definitely. Thank you, Erica, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I completed my PhD back in 2014 at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And during my PhD, I was part of the Cellular Biotechnology Training Program, or CBTP, through the NIH. And the CBTP required a 3-month internship in industry. And so I went to Dow AgroSciences in Indianapolis, and I loved every moment of my internship. I fell in love with the work, with the people, with the culture, and especially the work-life balance. People were leaving at 5, the lights were going off. The pay was very nice, and I decided that that was the type of lifestyle that I wanted. So I returned back to the University of Michigan to continue my PhD. I still had about a year remaining, but I was very driven. I knew after that internship that I wanted to go into industry. And so about 8 months before my PhD defense, I started applying to positions. I was applying all over the place. I was just kind of cold emailing, if you will. I would attach my CV. I'd write a little note saying, this is what I can do for you. A lot of times I didn't get responses back, but sometimes, they'd say, oh, we are hiring, look at this posting, things like that. There was a posting at Kaman Chemical in Ann Arbor that I applied to, and I knew someone who worked at the company. I contacted them. I said, hey, I applied. And I think it was probably through those connections that then I had an easy way into the interview, and I had a position lined up. They actually saved my position for 4 months so that they knew I wasn't going to defend until later in the year. So it was very nice because I could kind of just focus on my PhD defense. And then 2 weeks after my dissertation, I started at Kaman Chemical. So I've been working there ever since. I'm coming on 3 years now. And I'd say I spend about 60% of my time in the lab doing lab-related things, planning experiments, doing experiments, analyzing, documenting, keeping up with my notebooks. Another 10 to 15% of my time is spent doing paperwork. So at Kaman Chemical, we develop assay kits and reagents. And so I write the kit booklets. I write the standard operating procedures for production to then fill the vials and make the components. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And then the rest of my time, another 10 to 15% of my time is spent in meetings. We have biweekly group meetings where we go around and present and talk about troubleshooting and how our projects are going. We have big meetings with the company to talk about our vision and where we're going. We also have meetings with marketing. So it's important that, like a month before a kit goes live on the website, we need to inform marketing about what are the features, what can this kit do, and that way they can develop the promotional material and things needed. So I'm in new product development, and I spend a lot of time doing development of new kits. There's also a bit of kit maintenance or inquiries from tech support. So someone might call, came in and say, I was running this kit and I got this funky result. Or what happens if you use this solvent in this particular kit? And if we don't have an answer for them, I might pull a kit from inventory and actually go run it in the afternoon. And that way I have the answer for the customer and we can solve those various questions. So I'm kind of all over the place as far as testing old kits, also developing new kits in all different product areas. And so I love getting to be involved in tons of different research areas, and I really enjoy working on lots of projects at once, which is very different compared to my PhD where I was so focused on one topic, one project. I really like the flexibility.
Thanks, Jenna. Tommy, can you speak now?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Wonderful. I'm not sure what happened with the other phone line, but you are here now. So Tommy Sawyer is a distinguished scientist of discovery chemistry modalities and a peptide drug hunter at Merck Research Labs. Tommy, will you tell us a little bit about your career path, your typical day, and your job responsibilities?
I'm happy to, and just to be cut to the chase, I don't know if I have a typical day anymore, but I've been in industry for 35 years. I went directly into industry from graduate school, having had no industrial exposure whatsoever. So I was very naive, and I have a chemistry degree, but I did a lot of biology and biochemistry, and actually cell biology and biophysics and computational chemistry is part of my very multidisciplinary PhD work, which is maybe more typical these days than it was back in the late 70s when I was in graduate school. My days have evolved a lot since coming into industry, from being a scientist working in the lab, mostly as a chemist, but then becoming a computational chemist and working very closely with biologists because I kind of knew the language and had actually done a lot of biology as a graduate student, and to then evolve to go into management after about 10 years as a director level, and then I moved up the line, the totem pole, if you will, to be a vice president, a senior vice president, a chief scientific officer within industry, both big pharma, biotech, and a startup company called Aileron, which I was at before joining Merck. So I've kind of done everything, management, scientific ladder, and worked on many different kinds of targets in terms of enzymes, receptors, protein-protein interactions, and now even peptide nucleic acid interactions. So a lot of experience, and likewise to other members, other panelists that have spoken already. I truly love science. It's been a big part of my life, and I'm happy to extend the invitation beyond this webinar to anyone who is called in and listening to link in with me if you wish, and we're happy to help you in whatever way with your career or answer questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tommy. And just as a note, I think most of the audio has been fine from our speakers, but Frank and Jenna, if you could move closer to your phone if you're on speakerphone, I think that will. Thank you. All right. So I'm gonna ask a few questions of the panelists now. We'll just go back and forth, but for all of our participants who are listening in, please start sending your questions in via the chat box. I will intersperse those questions in and ask our panelists as we go through. It's very important to us to try and get all of your questions answered, so start sending them through the chat box. So to get us started, can you tell me a little bit about, and I think Frank has already answered this question, but from some of the other panelists, can you tell me a little bit about the most satisfying aspects of your work and or the most frustrating?
Yeah, I can jump in. This is Greg. I think really the most satisfying part of the job is really working in a team environment when it's clicking, if you will. I think it's very important in my experience that to be successful in an industry position is to be able to work in a team environment and understand your responsibilities and roles and how they kind of intertwine with others. And I think it's very gratifying when you have a task at hand and you can work in a team environment with 5, 10, 15 other people or whatever, and really accomplish those goals in the appropriate amount of time and answer the questions and discover new things all in the same process. I think that's a very rewarding part of the job. It's a thrilling aspect of the job. There are a lot of one thing I learned very quickly when I came to GSK was there's really a lot of people with a lot of great expertise and in their area, and so you can learn a lot just by sitting down and listening to them, having them explain their perspective and how they approach a problem. And so you put a bunch of kind of enthusiastic and driven minds together to address a problem, and really the solutions are really kind of fun. And the other aspect that I do find gratifying, and I realize this may sound a bit kind of college essay corny-ish, but I really just enjoy being part of a company whose goal is to make medicines that help get people better. Really focusing on areas of need in patients, and really trying to address those questions specifically. It can be very frustrating. It's a hard road. It's a long road, but it's a very kind of invigorating part of what we do.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to answer this question before we move on to some questions from our participants?
So it's Ray. Oh,
yep. Go ahead, Ray. Go ahead.
Right. I didn't bother to give you a bit of a background. I also have a long background in the pharmaceutical industry, so I would echo everything that Greg just said. If you are interested, if team science is of value to you or is interesting to you, the industry is really the area. It's very different than running your own project all the way through. You are hired usually for a need and for your particular expertise. And it has, in a sense, you can think of it a bit like an assembly line. You have an area of responsibility. Someone has an area of responsibility that picks up some part of what you're doing, but you're participating, as Greg said, in a team, so that you are intellectually engaged throughout the process.
Thanks, Ray. We've had a ton of questions come in, 15 actually, from our participants, and a number of participants are asking a question that I had flagged for later on, but let's go ahead and ask it now. So several of the participants asked about whether or not a postdoctoral fellowship is valuable. They noticed in your introductions that some of you have done postdocs and some of you did not do postdocs. So they're hoping to hear a little bit more about what the value of postdoctoral training is, and any advice you would have for grad students about whether or not to postdoc.
I can answer that. This is Jennifer, and I'm at Janssen. And so for the department that I work for, they really encourage candidates to have at least 2 to 3 years worth of postdoctoral training. And also Janssen also has a successful 2-year postdoctoral program if you're interested in going that route. But I believe they prefer candidates that have postdoctoral training because we're leading projects and we're expected to be independent quite quickly. So.
And you mentioned this a little bit. Does anybody have any perspective on an academic postdoc versus an industry postdoc? And you're also, the rest of you are also welcome to answer the question as well, the main question. Thank you.
It's Tommy here from Merck. I think that whether it's academic or industrial postdoc, it's maybe a little bit less fussy than it was maybe 10 years ago or something. It all depends on what the actual scope of the work is that one is doing as a postdoc, And here at Merck, we have actually many postdocs working, over the last few years since I've joined on, and I think they're getting extremely good training. And I think that training reflects well when they are looking to get permanent positions afterwards. So I do think that there's always exceptions to the rule, and that somebody coming out of a PhD may very well be highly trained and qualified and very accomplished to go directly into industry. That does happen. Maybe it's not the highest percentage of all candidates, but it does happen. So it's not impossible. It just depends on how highly trained and qualified and accomplished you are.
Yeah, this is Frank. I'd like to just echo what Tommy just said, but also offer that when we look at this, perhaps from a competitive position perspective. That is, currently we receive for any given position a lot of CVs. And it's very hard just by looking at the CV to differentiate one is better than the other. If the main pool of the candidates all have postdocs, and then the ones without will have to have some kind of special reason why it gets noticed by the company who's hiring. So there are certainly cases that made that way, maybe through some strong references and so on. But if the norm of the pool is all have certain postdoc training, and then we tend to, in the first kind of selection process, pick the one with it.
Great.
This is Jenna.
Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped the postdoc route. Maybe it was out of stubbornness. From my internship at Dow AgriSciences, I was so convinced that I want to go into industry, and I was ready to be out of academia. And so I really pushed for it, and I got some pushback from my colleagues and other people who were saying, oh, you want to go into industry? Why wouldn't you do a postdoc anyway? It's just extra experience. It will get you that much, it'll be that much easier to get an industry position. And they were probably right. I think I was lucky in landing this position. But, I don't have any regrets on my decision. I'm, definitely still learning now. I'm now on year 3 of my time here. I think it's definitely possible to get a job, but like was said by other panelists, if you're in a pool of people that all have postdocs, it is going to be a lot harder. That being said, if a company is looking for a specific technique and you did your entire PhD and have 6 years worth of experience versus a postdoc who may have done that technique for 1 month, you're definitely more qualified. And, don't be afraid to apply. I would say apply to everything, and if you get weeded out, that's fine. But if you don't try, you're kind of missing out.
Thanks, everyone. We've also had a number of questions about how to make yourself most competitive for a job, and we've talked a little bit about that. But can you tell us, we have several questions about, is it better to find a contact within the company and network? Is it better to work on your resume and have a stellar resume? Can each of you speak a little bit about some advice you have on making yourself most competitive to get an industry job?
I can take that one first. This is Greg. Actually, it's hitting a little close to home because I was the hiring manager for a position we recently filled at the end of last year. And I think my first response is, Erica, to the options that you listed, the answer is yes to all of them. I think, it's obviously very difficult depending upon the position, you'll get a lot of applicants from a lot of different backgrounds. And so it's, the important thing is to compose a quality resume. I think if you have connections with somebody in the industry or at that company, or I think that always helps. I think networking is important, and it can be an important way to get your foot in the door. Certainly, if you don't know people, I wouldn't despair. I mean, you should still obviously apply anyway, but it doesn't hurt. I think one of the big things is really to one thing that I found when we were looking is that there are a lot of people out there who are really good at science. I think what one attributes that were really important to me when I was hiring was communication skills, both oral and written. So thinking about what's important to you and being able to give a good thumbnail sketch of the work that you do, and giving evidence that you work well, again, in this team environment, or, that you've collaborated with others, I think is also really works to your advantage. And then if you do go along with the interview process, the opportunity to present your work, I think, is obviously really critical. Oftentimes we will have our candidates come in to give a research talk, and I think that's really an opportunity to really kind of show your stuff. And so being able to explain your work clearly can go a long way in helping you out. I mean, nobody expects somebody coming out of their postdoc or a PhD to understand how industry works. It's very different from working in academia, and you have to kind of learn on the job. But so nobody's expecting you to be an expert on that stuff. But what people are expecting you is to be able to present and defend the work that you did clearly, and being able to handle questions about your work, that you've thought about it more than just the surface layer.
Would anybody else like to answer that question, especially in regards to what skills industry is looking for in particular? Greg mentioned communication skills.
Yeah, I would just add to what Greg stated, and I think he hit all the key points. In terms of the networking, that does get to be the challenge, right? Because if you're trying to find out who the hiring manager is or identify individuals at the company that you're interested for relative to a job posting, I think my recommendation is don't give up. And I think Greg mentioned that you have to try. I use LinkedIn a lot with my own personal networking. It's very professional, kind of focused social network, if you will. And I encourage young people to leverage that to track down individuals who work at companies that they're interested in. And, most everybody is getting on LinkedIn now. That's one way to try to identify and then connect with people. And then, of course, if you're at a university, really take advantage of whatever connections the university or your department leadership or college leadership may have with industry to try to open the doors. And if that doesn't work, go through alumni who are at your school, it may be working in the area that you're interested in, and see if they know somebody. It's usually, possible to, network in these kinds of ways. But I would really encourage people, don't give up. Networking is key, and therefore communication falls in line with that as well.
Would anybody else like to add to that? I will tell you, we just got put under a tornado warning here in Rockville, so I think it's fine right now. But I may interrupt somebody to tell you I have to go to the basement, in which case Jenna will take over for me.
Okay, yeah, I would like to a couple of quick comments on just the communication and also networking. And so we've talked about how important to be a team player. We all enjoy the teamwork. And in our hiring, that is an important area we look into. So I would suggest to the candidate not just be able to say, I am a team player, but really prepare some good examples of showing how they did that in their graduate study or postdocs. Because changing from a hypothesis-driven PI champion environment to a goal-driven team metric-based environment, that can be quite different. So we're looking for not just be able to do it, but some specific examples. And another key factor for us, again, region to companies, we look for innovative people. Innovation is a big part of us, and again, that cannot be just said, oh, I am very innovative. We need examples, we need demonstrations of those.
Great. Thank you for
Erica,
all the
it's Ray.
Oh, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. It's been mentioned a number of networking possibilities. Don't forget meetings, scientific meetings. And if you have the opportunity to go to scientific meetings that are where where people from industry are also presenting or part of, it's a great place in those meetings to reach out to people. It was already mentioned that I would just emphasize again that there are not only postdoctoral opportunities in industry, there are also sometimes summer internship opportunities that allow you to figure out for you to understand whether this is something you would like to do. And it also gives you contacts within a particular company and through them contacts to other companies. So just add that point.
Thanks, Ray. That's a good point. So we've had about 6 or 7 questions about coming into industry not out of graduate school or a postdoc. So we've had a number of questions from people with master's degrees asking if their skills are still valuable in industry and what types of positions are open to them. And then we've also had a few questions from faculty members who are wondering how their additional experience as a faculty member would be valuable in industry. Can everyone speak a little bit to that?
So I can certainly speak. The entry-level technical positions in companies, so I can speak primarily around to larger pharmaceutical. This is Ray again. Most of the research-level technical positions, you call them technical, but primarily lab bench responsibilities, are bachelor's or master's being usually preferred over bachelor's. Prior experience in industry is also helpful if you've done some rotation in and out of an industry. And it also need that in companies you can progress beyond your master's level and in responsibility. You can assume the responsibilities of a PhD level individual. There are those opportunities to advance based on your career accomplishments, aside from also sometimes being afforded the opportunity to obtain additional degrees while you are continuing to work.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Ray said. I think, obviously we see this a lot here because we're such a large company that we're hiring for a number of different positions at a number of different levels. But as Ray said, a number of the technical, expertise positions really, the bachelor's and master's level scientists are really the kind of the driver for, they're the ones who are actually doing the work that needs to get done, and the technician level. But I just wanted to kind of add with a little bit of personal experience. I have a colleague who has been with GSK about 5-6 years longer than I have, and got a master's degree and entered GSK, and it may have taken him longer, but he's now more senior than I am. He's a director level, really driving the strategy of a number of our programs. And I think what that emphasizes is that once you're involved in industry, your education almost takes on a life of its own. You're learning on the job, and once you've been with the company for a certain number of years, there's no PhD that can really duplicate that experience. Particularly from the perspective of we need somebody to fill this role. I think somebody with that much experience is really highly valued and can really advance quite far in the company.
Would anyone else like to comment on that before I move on to the next question?
I think, Erica, the hanging chat here, in terms of that question was faculty members, professors, right, that might be interested to seek an industrial position. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, we had at least 3 people who are faculty members right now, and they're asking how their additional experience would be valuable to industry and how they could make a transition if they'd like to.
Yeah, I've through my 35 years, I've seen that happen many times actually. Professors moving from their academic research into an industrial environment. And in virtually almost all the cases, it's worked out quite well. And so I would, certainly encourage those who are thinking about it to apply. I would not say that it's impossible at all. It depends, on what they're looking for. Presumably they've been in academia for a while, or maybe they're tenure track and considering an option in case they don't get tenure, or maybe they've been in a department for quite a long time and they feel like they really want to challenge the industrial option. I would say just go ahead and apply. I think that the more experience one has, the more competitive you might be. It depends on the job opening itself and whether it's somewhere mid-level, not entry level, but somewhere in the middle, or maybe sometimes it might be a management position. And once you get into that category, oftentimes you have recruiters that are engaged to identify individuals, and sometimes candidates are coming from academia. There's plenty of examples, even in big pharma, where somebody comes in at a very high level right out of university. So just wanted to add a little bit of commentary for those individuals.
Thank you. So we've had a number of questions asking about the transition from academia to industry. So people are wondering if that was a hard transition for many of you, or if there's things that they can do to prepare to make the transition easier. And then I'd also like, if anyone would like to comment on work-life balance, especially the difference between academia and industry, I think now would be a good time to do that as well.
So I can start. This is Jenna from CUNY Chemical. One of the big differences from academia is that, at least in my situation, I'm currently working on at least 5, lots more projects in tons of different areas. And sometimes my boss will come and say, okay, we need an assay kit involving, inhibitor screening of some enzyme that I've never heard about ever. And so, there's a lot of reading of literature and learning about different product areas. And I guess my overall point is that you have to juggle a lot of projects at once. And so you need incredibly good time management and self-motivation, because you need to make sure that you're hitting deadlines and getting things done. At the same time, we'll have meetings where we'll discuss the progress of certain projects, and in that meeting, a particular project can be completely cut because maybe it's not efficient anymore, we're spending too much time, too much money. And so you have to be kind of mentally prepared to stop working on a project at any given time. And in academia, that's not really the case. During my PhD, it's always kind of like, okay, one more experiment. What happens, if we change this or test that? You can't really do that here because, we have costs and we need to get things on the catalog quickly. And so you really need to be flexible as far as just stop working on certain projects. As far as work-life balance, I feel like I've really mastered my work-life balance since working in industry. Most people are gone around 5 p.m. The lights are off. I don't take a lot of work home. There's occasionally days where, I want to read other papers, or maybe I'll do some kit booklet edits, but I'm not taking the work home like I did in academia, where I would be constantly analyzing experiments or just trying to read more papers. I'm very efficient with my time here. I would say more so than I was during my PhD, because I have set hours and I know that I need to get as much done as possible on as many different projects. And then when I go home, I'm home, and so I really enjoy that aspect of it. And that might change as I progress in the company. I'll probably be taking more and more work home. So I'm not saying that it's perfect, but overall, I think industry is a very nice position to have good work-life balance.
That was that work-life balance issue, Jenna, was driven home to me on the first year that I joined GSK. Here I was fresh out of a postdoctoral position, and it was getting near the end of the year, and I received an email from my admin telling me that I had 5 vacation days left, and I had to take them before the end of the year, otherwise I would lose them. So think about when you want to take your vacation. And it was such a stark contrast to being a postdoc that I was being reminded that I had to take my vacation days. It's a very different kind of environment. You when the lights go on, you're working, and when the lights go off, you're not. And I find that to be much more amenable to kind of being able to be there for my, at home for various things. And, if I have to leave a little early because I've got to get my kid to the doctor, then it's much more reasonable, I think, to be able to do that. I've been very fortunate. I think it's one of the fortunate aspects of the job, and you're always thinking about it, I think, but it's still, I think it's easier to leave it behind at work, from time to time. Yeah. So.
I would add to what Jenna and Greg have said, that taking charge is really critical here. Because you want to make a good entry into industry, into your new job, but you want to do it in a way that you're taking charge of your own time, your own work-life balance, and the time that you are putting into the job itself. That it's very highly efficient, and I think that's the driver here, because we all know that we can get distracted and fumble around and take much longer time than necessary to get things done. And I think if you want to have work-life balance, that's a big factor in the equation is you yourself and how organized you can be in order to accomplish, what you want to and what your expectations are in a certain time frame. And I think that sometimes I think maybe Jenna maybe reflected on this. When you're in the academia, sometimes time is just there, and you just kind of hang out and you're working, and it may not be the most efficient because it may not have to be coordinated with other people on a team and so forth, and kind of be run overall by a project manager who's just trying to keep everything going on a particular timetable. So I hear about work-life balance quite often, and the way I look at it is just what I've said. Take charge yourself, and whoever you report to will likely be very happy if they see you taking charge, rather than just kind of waiting to be, guided on what to do next. Take charge.
Hi, this is Jennifer, and I just wanted to go back to the differences between academia and industry and the transition. For me, what was surprising when I joined was how flexible I needed to be. And Jenna had mentioned you work on different projects, but also in industry, you have to have the ability to move around as the needs of the company changes, and that's also very valuable. I mean, I've served 3 very different roles within my department, and maybe one of them has something to do with what I've trained in my PhD and postdoc research. I've joined in the assay development department, but we needed a knockout cell line, so then I had to become the in-house expert for CRISPR-Cas9 within like 2-3 months. Before I knew it, I was giving seminars in it in front of 300 people at Janssen. Everyone was coming to me for answers. And then there was a change in the company. An immediate need for antigen design was needed because I had a protein structure background. I was moved to that. So it's not that I had a choice, but because everyone knew I was flexible and I was adaptable to all of these things, I've been given great opportunities and leadership roles because of these qualities. And in terms of work-life balance, Johnson & Johnson is a great family company, and we have really great health benefits. And so we have fitness trackers that we can use. We have recreational activities on site, like soccer, tennis, also arts and crafts, even culinary demonstrations. So that's important as well to me, just for health benefits and reducing stress levels.
Wonderful. So we've had a few questions about internships, and about postdocs and internships. So we've had one of our participants asked, can you still do an internship after having 2 to 3 years of a postdoc? And we had another participant ask a related question is, are you disadvantaged to getting into industry if you've been a postdoc for 6 or more years? So I think those questions are kind of related, if you guys could speak to those.
I'll start with the second question with the postdocs, being a postdoc for more than 6 years. I would be lying if I didn't say that as a hiring manager I didn't notice that on a resume, that somebody's been at 2 or 3 different postdoc positions. My advice would be, in that situation, to be ready to answer why you did that. So in other words, what happened? What did you hope to gain? And I would express it in a positive light. I would try to avoid saying, well, the job market stunk or something like that. I would really try to kind of be very positive and proactive about, what I gained by doing these, because I think a number of the panelists have emphasized this, that when you join industry, you're hired for a particular role or for a particular level of expertise, but it's not long before you're asked to expand into other areas. So the more tools you have in your toolbox is a good thing. So if you have more experience in different areas because you did more than one postdoc, I think that's a good thing overall. But I think you should probably be prepared to address that in interviews and be able to express it clearly and I would say in a positive way.
Great. Anybody else want to give a response? We're close to 2 o'clock.
I can't speak for postdocs, but as a graduate student trying to get an internship in industry, I actually applied to the undergraduate internship program at Dow AgroSciences, and I was accepted, and I, stayed in the hotel with all the other undergraduates. I kind of felt like the mom because I was one of the older people there, but there were a couple other graduate students who were doing internships as well. All I have to say is that they were so happy that I was a PhD. They thought it was amazing because I was already trained and I could just hit the ground running. Not to say that undergraduates are not, but I had a few extra years of experience. And even at Cayman, we have summer internships as well, and we get a whole variety of all different, levels of experience, and we love to have a variety. And so I would say just apply to everything. Even if you feel way overqualified, people are going to be happy that you did.
Thanks, Jenna. So we're just about at 2 o'clock. I think some of our panelists are able to stay, and the participants are also welcome to stay, but I'm going to go ahead and give our closing for those of you who do need to leave at 2 o'clock. I would like to thank all of our participants. We still have 76 people on the phone. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I hope this was a useful webinar for you. And I do apologize again that we weren't able to have webcams today. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties that precluded that, but we do normally have webcams on these webinars. After you close out of the webinar software, whether it's at 2 o'clock or whether it's after we have some more Q&A time, you will be automatically taken to a post-webinar survey. It's very short, less than 5 minutes, and it will really help us improve future webinars. And for those of you who are not currently members of the ASBMB, if you complete the survey, you'll get a membership discount code that you can use for $10 off new graduate student memberships or $20 off postdoc memberships. And I would like to also finally send another thank you to our panelists. I appreciate you giving this much time today to talk to all of our participants and to give this webinar with me. So thank you to our participants and thank you to our panelists. Everyone is welcome to get off. It's now 2 o'clock, but for those panelists who can stay, I'm going to keep asking questions until we run out.
Yes. Thank you. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Erica. Erica, I need to leave, but I did want to encourage folks. I've already gotten a couple requests. People who are participants on the line, if they'd like to ask me questions, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to take questions or have a conversation that way.
Great, and just for reference for our participants, that was Greg Gatto, and you can find his information on our webinar website as well. Thanks,
Great,
Greg.
thanks, Erica. Bye-bye now.
All right, our next question is, how did you decide which companies to apply to when you were first applying out of academia?
I'm waiting for somebody else to answer that question because I go back to 1981 and how things were done then was probably next to irrelevant to how they're done now. But I was specializing in the peptide science and peptide chemistry and peptide drug discovery at the time. And there were, most companies were developing groups to do that kind of work back then. So I don't think I wrote one single letter. It was a crazy thing. I didn't write a single letter. My professor was so well known in the field, was one of the world authorities, that companies would just ask him if he had any students finishing up or postdocs, and I had a windfall of opportunity, sometimes offers right over the phone or offers just without even interviewing. So very different and probably, like I said a minute ago, not very realistic for current times, so I'll let somebody else speak to it.
Jenna or Jennifer, would you like to comment on this?
This is Jennifer. I got lucky and networking paid off, and I was recruited by Johnson & Johnson, so I didn't have to apply to many jobs. But I will have to say I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, and I did a little bit of everything from teaching. I was a part-time professor, and also I was president of the Postdoctoral Association, so I made connections with people in industry and kind of just did informational interviews. I wanted to know what they did in their position, and so I just got a lot of information that way, and it just helped me make my decision in pursuing a career in industry.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jenna, do you have anything to add?
I have a pretty boring answer because I basically was geographically limited as to where I was applying, just due to my husband and family situations. And so, I think it would be a lot more daunting if I were to try to think now all over the world where would I want to apply. So I guess I kind of had it easy.
It's Ray. I'll give a comment on, again, I was in the same time generation as Tommy spoke about, but I also moved between companies, as Tommy has done too. So that was different. There I was having to look for a job 15 years ago. And so I basically went after everything I could find. Again, with a preference on the geographical location. The more limitations you put on, the more difficult it will be. But you will find a rather common experience at just about in most places that you enter.
Thanks, Ray. We've had two participants ask about recruiters, whether industry uses recruiters to find qualified PhD candidates and whether that's a good way for people to go. And
if you're a recruiter, the answer is going to be yes. Yes, they do help, and companies do often use recruiters to fill specific needs. So I would say it works both. It can be helpful. It certainly can be helpful.
Tommy, I have a question specifically for you. So Mackenzie asked, do you feel like, to get into the managerial side of industry, do you feel that someone should have an MBA or some sort of business-driven degree in addition to a PhD? And I think all of you can answer that as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You would almost kind of intuitively think the answer might be yes, but from my vantage point and from my experience, I don't see that relative to like scientific management. In the business side, business development side, that might be more typical, or finance side. But in the scientific R&D leadership, I don't see that additional degree, MBA, being critically important or required. Usually, if we're talking about scientific management track, director level, VP, SVP, typically that's born out of just experience and all the good skill sets that have been mentioned over the webinar up to this point, and also accomplishment, from your own work within your industrial career. So there might be, on the other hand, and other panelists might have something to comment on this too. In biotech and smaller companies, there might be some advantage to having both experience, research, and a business MBA because of the multiple hats that one has to wear. Jenna has commented on that a couple of times, and that's how smaller companies are in general, biotech-wise, and some other companies that might provide, products and commercial products, reagents, and these sorts of things to wear multiple hats. So I'm not sure if it gives you a fast track into big pharma. It might give you a competitive edge for smaller size companies.
Susan asked, is it true that if you do an industry postdoc at a company, that company will not hire you after you complete the postdoc?
So that answer is no.
Okay.
And it may vary from company to company, but by and large, a postdoc position, one of the motivations for having postdoctoral positions at companies, one of the motivations is it gives you a chance to review that person and how well and understand how well they work. So often you are attempting to hire your best postdocs.
Great, thank you. We talked a little bit about skills that are important for grad students and postdocs to gain while they're in graduate school or during their postdoc. But Kim asks, are there any skills most academic grad students generally lack that would be important for them to pick up that you see frequently new hires not having?
Time management.
And sometimes, just the general presentation or communication skills, or communicating what you want to bring across in a clear, concise sort of way. And another thing that I wanted to say before I have to actually get off here myself is ask questions. Unless you are capable of being Spock-like and can do a Vulcan mind meld with somebody else, you need to ask questions. And if someone asks me what communication skill or technique do you think most impacted my personal career, it was I asked questions. I inquired.
Absolutely.
I wasn't shy. I didn't even care if they were dumb questions or if someone might think it's a dumb question. I asked because I find when I speak to other individuals, I am surprised, and even more so nowadays than in past decades, that oftentimes people are very shy and don't want to ask because there's so much information. Everybody always assumes that other people, more senior people, know a whole lot more, and that they don't want to look, as if they're naive or so non-expert. Just put that away, and don't be shy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Second that one.
Sarah asks if you can give us any tips on successful application process and the interviews. And I think we've talked a lot about the application process, but do you guys have any pointers about interviews?
This is
my
Jennifer.
interview. This is Jenna. I'm sorry. I needed to give a scientific talk, and so I made sure that it was very polished and that it was at a level that a lot of different areas of science people could understand. So don't take your one of your technical PhD talks. Make sure that you make it very broad and easy to understand. And you're going to get a lot of questions about it, so be prepared to defend and answer questions. Then I had a lot of group interviews with a lot of different groups, and they would all kind of ask a variety of behavioral questions, technical questions. Kind of be prepared for anything. Be very professional. We have an ASBMB video tutorial if you'd like to check that out on the webpage about what to wear and what not to wear and things like that. But just be prepared to talk science, and it's going to be a grueling, long day, but it's going to be worth it in the end if you get the position.
Thanks, Jenna.
And it's Ray again. Also, do your homework on wherever you're going to interview. If you have the opportunity to do the interview, even when you're writing your cover letters, know something about where you're, know as much as you can about where you're applying. It gives you the opportunity to ask questions relevant to that specific opportunity.
Thanks, Ray. Jennifer, were you going to say something?
Yes, in terms of interviewing, like Jenna said, it was a full day of interviews, and I did have a scientific talk. Most of my questions were behavioral based, and I had already prepared using the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result. And so that really helped in terms of being prepared for the actual interview.
Thanks. That's a great point. So Kara asks, what does the promotion process look like at your company?
Can you repeat the question, Erica? I didn't hear you.
Sure. Kara asked about what the promotion process looks like at your companies.
So I can start. This is Jenna. Every year we have to fill out a job performance review, and so we have to answer a variety of questions and talk about what we did the previous year. Our manager will fill out the same form, and then we'll have a discussion about it. And then there's talks as to kind of where you are in the company. And so kind of each year there's an evaluation, and you can kind of work towards, we have certain ladders based on where you're starting in the company as to where you can work toward the next step. And that's really just a conversation every year with your particular manager.
Jennifer, Ray, either of you, or Frank if he's still on?
So I can speak to, again, a little bit Ray. Although retired now, it wasn't so long ago. The promotion, you should, in general, you're not going to be surprised. It's basically anticipated that you have prepared for you are basically prepared for the next level, and so you are advancing to a level that you're now qualified for. Your feedback is very much what Jenna described, but often in larger companies it's quite broad. You will have interaction. You'll have feedback from people that you've worked with on your management ladder across different groups where you've interacted in a matrix manner and project teams and so forth. So it tends to be so the feedback is quite broad, and the conversations are very frequent.
Great, thanks. I have two more questions for everyone, and then I think we will call it a day. So Mackenzie asked a follow-up question. She's curious what you mean by behavioral questions. I think both Jenna and Jennifer mentioned that. So could you just tell us briefly what you mean?
You want to start, Jennifer?
Sure. I can kind of give you an example of a question, like, tell me about a time that you overcame a problem with a fellow scientist. And so you would approach it by describing the situation that you were in, about the problem. Then you go on, again, this is the STAR method of answering the question. Then you go on to task, what goal were you working towards? Action, describe the actions that you took to address the situation, and then the result, and that's just describing the outcome of the situation. I don't know, Jen, if you have anything more.
No, I think that's a great answer. Lots of questions like that describe a time, and it could be technical as well, like when you used a particular instrument, and so you really have to show your knowledge about how you use it and how you would generate data and results and things like that. But a lot of them are situational. How do you interact with other people? Because a lot of industry is working as a team and working with other people, and not all people are easy to get along with. So they're really trying to understand who you are as a person. And so I really like the STAR method. I hadn't heard of that before, but I'm definitely going to take that away from this webinar as well. But just be prepared to tell stories. And I think when I was preparing for interviews, I really thought through a lot of different stories and had a bunch just ready to go. So any question that they would ask, I could kind of fill in with various stories and examples of events and things like that.
Great, thank you. One last question for today. And so we have a few participants who have said that they've applied to a number of different positions, but they haven't been able to get any telephone interviews, and they're not really sure what to do about it. So I know this is a somewhat particular question. You can't give specific advice, but can you speak broadly to what someone can do if they're applying a lot, they're not getting interviews, and they're not really sure where to go from there?
I think you should try a different method than what you're doing. And maybe networking would be the way to go. And in terms of successful networking, to me, I think people forget that follow-up is really important. It's not just about collecting LinkedIn connections or business cards. You have to establish that relationship. Maybe the job isn't available at that time, but you want them to keep you in mind for future opportunities.
I think that's great advice. All right, I think that wraps us up, that we got through all of the questions that were asked. I think we answered over about 48 questions today. So again, a big thank you to our panelists, especially those who are still on the phone. And a thank you to all of our participants who came out. As a reminder, the ASBMB does have at least 7 more webinars coming up this year. All of them are complimentary to both members and non-members. And we also have a number of career resources on our website. You can just go to www.asbmb.org and click on the Careers tab, and you'll find a whole bunch of different resources for industry, academic, and other types of careers. Finally, just a reminder to complete the post survey. As soon as I end this, you'll be taken to the survey, and you'll get that discount off of new membership for those of you who are not already members. And for those of you who are members, we are happy to have you. And thank you to everyone for attending.